give us a bit of an example of what you're talking about. Your Labour Together recently did a report on immigration, which is sort of a really good example, I guess, of an area where they have struggled to tell the kind of story that you're telling to the kind of voter that you're talking about. And there is a real tension within the voter coalition that you talk about between being able to tell that story to voters who might be attracted by reform or the populist right, and perhaps sort of younger progressive activists, Labour supporters who are very pro-immigration and see current government policy as being an outrage, Rwanda as being an outrage. Tell us a bit about how your report sort of tried to find a way through that, I guess.
Yeah, I think that in some ways the language of finding a way through is part of where we need to start and kind of pause and think about if that's what we really want to do when it comes to something like migration. And I think so much of these sorts of policy areas are less about, what is the technocratic fix that will reduce the backlog, that will enable cross-border policing to more effectively stop boats leaving Calais and so on. And more a question like, what does it mean to design and communicate policy to demonstrate to the people whose trust has been eroded in government that you understand where they're coming from? And on something like migration, I think there are lots of people on the left who sort of at some level think that language like control over borders is a kind of necessary pact with the devil that Labour have to talk about in order to win elections. And I think the first fundamental starting point has to be that, democracies since the ancient Athenians have essentially depended on the citizens of a country being able to say who else becomes a citizen of the country, who else is going to be part of the demos, who else is going to join this self-governing group of people. And, the Leave argument in the referendum campaign made that point very simply and very powerfully. And rather than engaging with that point and saying, well, that's true, but in the modern world, we have to give up some of that basic old democratic right in order to, grow our economies faster, trade effectively, whatever it might be, that premise was never really accepted. And I think that's a real mistake because, the basic intuition is our government needs to have control over our borders, and the people that we vote for need to have the power to decide who else becomes a member of our democracy. And, that is not a policy design, it's a principle. But it's a principle that I think we have not, and by we I mean the centre-left, have not done a good enough job communicating that they understand is a moral principle that working people in this country feel has not been understood by political elites. And unless you start there, you're not going to get anywhere.
And I think you make a powerful point because there was, there's always been the accusation amongst some in the Labour Party that you're just all for open borders and, anybody who even talks about immigration is racist. But then the policy, the policy details are important. I mean, you got into a tiny bit of hot water by suggesting that the government should put people smugglers on a barge and ship them to the north of Scotland. I mean, that. Is that a sort of is that a kind of thing of showing that you're being tough on immigration, but then maybe the policy thing went a bit far?
Well, the point I was driving at there is that we are punishing the wrong people. You're punishing innocent people who are, fleeing war and persecution, and the Conservative government are trying to demonstrate that they're tough on controlling borders by putting those people on barges. So they're punishing the wrong people. The people they should be punishing are those exploiting people who are fleeing war and persecution, which is the gangs. And I think, symbolism matters.
Scotland's as a Scot, I mean, Scotland is beautiful. Come to Scotland, but maybe don't send the people smugglers to Scotland.
Scotland was, there's no way of putting it other than a total mistake. I was I was panicking in the middle of an interview and thinking, I need somewhere that has lots of coastline and is far from where the barge currently is, which is in the south of England. So that's how you get to Scotland. Scotland was clearly not thoughtful policy, and I hugely regret saying that.